Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning as we're recording this. I suppose you could be watching at any time of day. Hello, everyone, for another edition of Kernels. My name is Sam Bouwers. I'm the consultant for continuing education at the State Library of Iowa. I am joined today by Michelle Anderson of the Atlantic Public Library here in Iowa. And we have a very fun kernel today. But first, let me tell you a little bit about kernels. If you're new to the series, each kernel is a small pop. Hope you get the popcorn reference there of professional development. They're pre-recorded. They're these really informal conversations featuring cool stuff going on in libraries all around the state. And so Michelle here today from Atlantic to tell us about a cool program I learned about as I was visiting Atlantic for the Director Roundtable this spring. And it's not really a book club, although it would fall into that vein of adult programming, but it's a discussion club that Michelle and her team at Atlantic have started up, and they've called it There's More to the Story. So Michelle is going to tell us a little bit about More to the Story program that they're doing. But first, Michelle, can you tell us just a little bit about Atlantic itself? What kind of town does your library serve?
Sure. So Atlantic is kind of a hub of Southwest Iowa. We are just under 7,000 people, but we are the county seat. And so we do get a lot of use from folks around the county and even outside the county who depend on Atlantic for, for grocery shopping, for medical appointments, whatever. So we do have a wider draw. Like I said, we're kind of a hub of Southwest Iowa. But yeah, we're blessed because we've just done some major building renovations and updates. We just updated our elevator, so we don't have to worry about that falling apart. And our library use has really blossomed as well. We think we finally made it past maybe what we're calling that COVID slump, where we're seeing people are coming and people are staying and using the library. And, it's not just digital services. It's a little bit of everything that we're seeing more attention to.
Yes, I gotta say, I visited when I was there in May of 2024 for the Director Roundtable. I think you guys were newly open. And I just want to encourage anybody who's dealing with an old Carnegie type building, go to Atlantic to see what they've done. And this is a side note from the More to the Story piece, but I love your children's area in the basement. It doesn't feel like a basement. It feels warm and welcoming. And what kid wouldn't want to be down there? And then, of course, upstairs, all the adult stuff. Beautiful space, beautiful renovation. Congratulations. Anyway, but there's more to the story. Tell us a little bit about this discussion club. What have you guys been doing with this group in Atlantic over the last couple of years?
So a few years ago, we had absolutely zero adults participate in our winter reading program. And so we decided that we are going to bail on that and do a year-long challenge. And I had big ideas. I was like, let's do something really great. So we decided we were going to do more like topical. So kind of like choose your own book, but with a little bit of guidance. And then because we chose to go that direction, I said, well, but it doesn't make sense to not have an opportunity to talk about what you've read and to share any new ideas that you came across. So thus began There's More to the Story. It was a leap of faith. I made sure my library board understood what I was doing. And the first couple meetings were a little nerve-wracking because I didn't know what really I was walking into. But
so I just want to interrupt for one quick minute here. So with more to the, so you mentioned, so it's not really just a book club. We're all going to read. Oh, I just started Olive Kittredge. We're not all going to read the same one book and talk about it.
Right.
We are going to sort of engage all on the same topic, though. Is that right? So we're going to pick a topic, and we're going to pick a venue through which we want to learn about that topic, and then we're going to get together. And am I right in thinking that your topics were not just like what color to paint your house.
Right, right.
You're
No, we took on what some people would call wicked issues,
okay. All
like
right.
healthcare. We took on poverty. We took on um, climate change. I mean, these are big things. Um, and here's my reasoning.
Yeah.
Okay, so why did we do this? Because we want to make sure our community knows the library is a place to explore and share ideas. We want the library to be that place where if you engage in a conversation, we can have that conversation and it can even become a bit of a debate, but we don't have to yell at each other. We can learn from nonfiction and fiction books. I know we do this all the times with kids, kids' first trip to the dentist. We have books about that. We have books about our favorite characters going to the dentist. We have nonfiction books about what the dentist does and how the training they did and why you need to clean your teeth. But we don't often hang on to that as adults. And so the other piece of this is after we had already started this, I ran into, and now I can't think of her name, the podcast host of Harry Potter and the Sacred Text.
Oh, sure. I know
Actually,
the podcast. I also don't
yeah,
remember her name right now, but go
actually,
ahead.
she wrote a dissertation on reading Jane Eyre as a sacred text.
Mm.
And she talks about how when you approach a text, even secular fiction, and you expect to learn something from it, like 9 times out of 10, you do. So because we're approaching reading these materials that we choose, expecting to look for a common thread, we often have something to bring to the table, whether we knew it or not. And then because we started this in 2023, I said, well, and it's not a big election year. It's a little under the radar. And gulp, they liked it so much last year, we're still going.
Okay, and good thing 2024 is not proving to be like a really contentious election or anything.
Yeah,
A
no,
little bit
not
of
at all.
sarcasm
Not at
for us.
all. So just to give you a better taste of the types of topics, here you
Mhm.
go. So in 2023, we really tried to select topics that somehow engaged in things for that month. Like, I believe February is Black History Month. And so oftentimes we see poverty and income inequality through systemic racism. Climate change in April because of Earth Day.
Mm.
June was discrimination and equality because it's Pride Month. So that's kind of how we selected our topics for the first year. And then this year, I said, okay, I've got to have a better system. So we actually found a summary of major political movements of the 2010s. And so we took, and it was a list of 11 things. So we don't meet in December because who wants to talk about big, ugly topics, about the time of Christmas. So we take December off. So we do 11 a year. And so this was, this list of 11 political movements then is what we're using as our framework for this year. We're just getting ready to have our conversation on the Green New Deal.
Okay.
Which is kind of, we kind of opened it up to, climate issues, any environmental issues, even though the movement was mostly about investing in green industries and divesting from companies that were not as green or environmentally friendly.
Mhm.
So it's kind of just all in how you frame it. I know what my staff that helps me put out the displays, she's like, I don't know if we have anything. I said, we'll have things. Don't worry. It's fine.
Well, and when you get to pull from all parts of your collection on some of this stuff too, then I think you're really able to fill in those displays a little bit.
Right. Well, and even this year, we had, like in April, we had tenants' rights
Mhm.
in affordable housing. And then we kind of have the same vein in August with the fight for $15 minimum wage.
Oh, sure.
But we kind of, I selected things as like in April, I kind of did housing and the wealthy side. And then in August, I'll pull out more of the books that show more of the poverty side.
Sure.
So there's ways we can get around that, not get around that. But also because we have some that are similar, I know I'll have people who said, oh, I want to read that one in August. Like when we talk about it and we share what we've read. Oh, I think I'll read that one in August.
Can I ask you a question that was not necessarily on my pre-list? And
Of
so
course.
if you need to take a minute and circle back to it, that's fine. But these are really tricky issues, and you sort of mentioned like we have. I think you're going to talk a little bit about your ground rules, but like how did you yourself prepare to lead conversations on some of these issues? Is there a resource you can recommend to somebody who's, maybe wants to tackle a Green New Deal conversation and is feeling like, wow, my library might not be standing at the end of that conversation?
So, so in 2023, my intention was to facilitate, but not be the expert. So
Mhm.
for each of our discussions in 2023, I recruited a local expert. So with healthcare, our local hospital CEO came in.
Mhm.
With voting and civic engagement, our city clerk and our county auditor came in and talked
Oh,
about opportunities for serving on boards, and were able to answer some questions about official civic engagement. Um, for discrimination and equality, I invited a trans woman who is openly trans, who lived in town, um, to come and talk about her experience as it relates to just the bigger issue of discrimination and equality. And you'll notice that I didn't say LGBTQ plus rights.
mhm.
I said discrimination and equality. And it was really, really interesting because we had people talking about racism. We had people talking about socioeconomic discrimination. We had people talking about gender issues. Um, and it was a really good discussion. And I think because we set it up as a broader stroke, even though I had a trans woman talking to us as our expert, um, it was an excellent conversation.
That's great.
So because that had already happened last year, I'm not doing quite as good. My track record in getting local experts for this year has been much hit and miss. Or last year I had somebody every month.
Yeah.
Um, but because we'd already set that as Michelle isn't the expert, Michelle doesn't know, Michelle is here to keep us on topic,
Mhm.
um, then I don't feel like I have to necessarily contribute to the conversation in any way above the way I would personally.
So I think that's a good reminder for someone who might start a similar club. It's not your job to say, well, Jim is right and Bob is wrong, and now it's going to move on, but to say, this is a great example of how there's tension on this topic. And in order to keep us on track, I'm going to move along to my next question on this issue, that kind of thing, but just real facilitation skills.
Right, right, for sure. So let me just go a little bit more into what happens month to month.
Hmm.
Um, so each month, especially last year, I arranged for a local expert that was somehow related to the topic. We had our local county naturalist come in for the climate change one. I gave some other examples already. We put out a book display with a variety of fiction, nonfiction, large print, audiobook, as diverse a collection as we could. And things disappear. So that's one thing I will really say in Atlantic. Displays disappear. You put book displays out, they will take it. And I've worked in like 3 different bookstores, and that doesn't happen in bookstores. Like, cool, we've had to refill displays more here than anywhere else.
Good problem to have.
Right? So then we also, in 2023, we did this bookmark. So every month we'd have bookmarks available. So that's kind of what you see off to the left here. We did the bookmark horizontally, and one side always had our graphic image plus the month and the topic, and then the back side had some suggested books. And you can see that for healthcare, we're looking at anything health related. So some of the things we suggested in the bookmark were Jodi Picoult's Small Great Things, Lisa Genova's Every Note Played. Some nonfiction include the Henrietta Lacks book, the You Will Get Through This Night, that's a mental health book, mental health nonfiction. So we did that every month, so bookmarks were always available. And then for about 5 days before our discussion group, I would drop links, online links on our Facebook page. And the first year I was really good about also putting those on our website. So if you didn't have time for a book, but you had time for a podcast, or you had time for a reputable news source, or you had time to watch a short video or a documentary, that there were some links for you to feel like you engaged with something before you came to the discussion.
I love that. And I also just love that this lets you get into your backlist a little bit too. Some of like Immortal out of Henrietta Lacks. Probably most libraries have a copy of that sitting around, and it probably hasn't searched as well as it did a few years ago. So the way to kind of promote some of that backlist with these topics of stuff that's not out of date yet, obviously on these hot topic issues, stuff could get out of date quickly, but you are going to find some of those classics that are a little more perennial as well.
And that too, that's why we were looking for even nonfiction books that are more topical than what you might see as, how to navigate healthcare,
Right.
or how to sign, how to select your Medicaid or whatever. That obviously doesn't hold up for years. So as far as collection development, this is the kind of stuff that holds up, just like you were saying.
That's fabulous. All right.
And then, so we always meet the last Tuesday of the month, so they have the whole month to prepare. And we've had anywhere from, well, my lowest number was 2. And we had a really good discussion, even with just 2.
That's great.
And then I've had as many as like maybe 14 or 15, which for us is really good. And really, when you're discussing hard things like this, you don't want too much more than that. So we always start with, saying why we're here, saying the things that we share, stay with the group. We don't repeat it outside. And then we start by going around the room, and everyone shares what book or other resource they use to prepare for the discussion. So some people come with a whole book report. This is the book I read. Here's all the major plot points. Some people are less formal about it, but coming from an education background, it gives everyone an opportunity to say something as we start. And then once we've been around the room, we open up for discussion. If we have a local expert in the room, I may ask them to share some of their thoughts as it pertains to what people have already said. Otherwise, we usually don't run out of things to talk about. And then my job is just to keep us on task. There's only been a couple times where we've really veered away from the topic at hand, and I just have to say, you know what, we have another month to talk about that, or it's time to circle back. Let's remember why we're here. And then that's just really my job, more in moderation than contributing to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then as much as possible, I like to close with another go around the room. So sharing something you learned, or maybe if you have a final thought that you're going to go encourage come almost every month. She was one of my 2 that came when I only had 2. Said that she's like, we don't solve any of these issues, but it sure helps me to think about it.
That's
and like, there's the light bulb. It sure helps me think about it. And she says she goes home and looks things up. And
yes.
and I think that's really awesome.
Well, and I mean, I will say too, you said your role was just to facilitate, but it sounds like you are also doing quite a bit of legwork and investigation to say, okay, here is a podcast from a source that I recommend. Here is a news article, and here's why, someone pushes back, well, here's why I chose that source, for example. So, I mean, you say just, but it sounds like this is a little bit of work for you.
Yeah, it is. But we talk about wanting to create public who understands what is a reputable source online and what isn't. And so I feel like I'm demonstrating that as I'm sharing those links, you know.
It's patron education wrapped up in a
Essentially.
broader program. So sneaky education
Right.
from our educator in the room here. Nice work. So I
Yeah.
think I had a question about, you've kind of talked about community partners. Do you want to talk about your favorite topics now? Where do you want to go next?
Sure. Okay, so I do have a couple. So I thought about my favorite ones from each year.
Yes.
So this was, I referred to this before. This was my June 2023 when we were talking about discrimination and equality issues. And this is what my local expert said. And I just had to write it down. And I made this little quick graphic on Canva and I posted it the next day from the
Mhm.
library.
Oh,
And it was just, it was just, we walked away with this sentiment that what if we just knew each other better? We know each other better. And I feel like we really achieved that on that evening.
that's a beautiful sentiment, community building wrapped up in these bigger kind of conversations. That's great. And so do you have a highlight from this year so far as well?
I do. It's not quite as pretty.
It is a
So,
cute graphic, and props to your Canva skills.
so I follow the Southern Adirondack Library System does a fantastic job with their social media. And since I'm mostly on Facebook, I follow them on Facebook. Um, and they posted this after our discussion last month. And we kind of ended the discussion looking at each other like, we really aren't achieving anything. Like, why do we do this? And it was an off day. And I was just like, oh, I didn't even really want to be there. But after the discussion, even though it had been a long day, I felt better. I went home with a lighter heart than a heavy heart. And the next day, this popped up in my Facebook feed, this meliorism, the belief we can contribute to positive change and improve the world through acts of love, creativity, compassion, and kindness. And I thought that was just timed out really well because that's kind of how I felt that discussion happened. Again, we're not solving any of the world's issues. We're not even solving the issue for our little community, but we're showing compassion and kindness to one another as we talk and as we share about those ideas.
That's amazing. You mentioned you're one community member who had kind of shared that same sentiment. We're not solving anything, but I sure am learning a lot. What other community feedback can you share? Either positive. I'm assuming most of it has been positive. It seems like it's been well received.
Yes, unbelievably so. I even, when I share some links, because I just schedule them out so on the business suite for Facebook so that it'll just drop things one a day. And some of the links, even I'm like, oh, someone can just look at this link and go off on a rant, and I'm gonna have to turn off comments. And it just hasn't happened yet. And honestly, I think we have the reputation in town that we're a place to explore and understand. And I think that's being respected.
That's amazing. Well, and I love hearing you talk about this and your overall vision for the program and to see how it's been received. I think I can really commend the library on that. It didn't happen in a vacuum. Obviously, you've been at Atlantic for how long?
I don't know. This wasn't in my questions.
Oh, sorry.
I want to say like 7 years.
So yeah, so you've had time
So yeah,
to,
we know each other now.
yes.
So, I wouldn't recommend doing this when you start a new job.
Right.
Like when you're just getting to know a community, you gotta get to know them first. But yeah, so I've been here over 5 years before we started to stretch like this.
Are there any other so you showed us your timeline through the rest of 2024. Are you looking at continuing this into 2025, making any changes? What are your plans for the future of the group here?
They're a little up in the air right now. We saw some ideas about learning about cultures.
Hmm.
So one of our ideas for next year is maybe to do geographic locations and you know, read authors from that location or stories that take place in that location to try and get more of a worldview. But I don't know. This is my group that really wants to engage the community in civic engagement is the best way to think about that, or the best phrase for that. And we're also looking at possibly switching to a more traditional book discussion where we would discuss a chapter or two of a given book every meeting. So I'm not sure if it's going to continue in this format or not. But I don't think I could get my people that come to this to also do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it felt almost unique in adult programming that I've seen. So that's why I wanted to call it out in a kernel here, because I think it's really, really interesting. All right. So I heard one piece of advice, which was don't start this day 2 on the job. Get
Right.
to know the community, figure out what's going to work for your community. Any other advice that you'd want to share with somebody who's thinking of starting up a discussion club like this?
Well, I definitely think that the key for our success that first year was inviting our local experts,
Mhm.
was, getting our our healthcare administrator, was getting sheriff's deputies to talk about incarceration, was having that one more connection and letting them function as an expert, letting them answer questions about how this is affecting us locally, I think really gives us a clearer vision of what's happening and what those topics right where we live. And we're not just talking Iowa, we're talking in our city, in our county.
Absolutely. I think it helps bring home in our globalized society. I mean, we've talked about Facebook off and on throughout this whole thing. There's pluses and minuses to living in a world where everything is so interconnected, right? You lose sight of the fact that these are issues that are impacting citizens of Atlantic, citizens of Southwest Iowa, and having that local expert on board to say, well, here's how I see this play out in the rural parts of our county. Really can open someone's eyes to be like, oh, this isn't just a problem over there with those people. These are my neighbors. And I love your little graphic about caring for our neighbors and the kind of world that creates and the kind of world we want to live in. So I think I asked all my questions. Any final thoughts that you want to share?
I can't think of anything.
Well, this is so great. And Michelle, I'm just so thankful for how you've led Atlantic in this effort. And thank you for sharing a little bit about it with us here on Kernels. I hope that those watching will feel encouraged that this kind of programming is possible in your town, that facilitating these kinds of conversations is a very natural and good thing for a public library to do, with the right relationships, with the right sort of program building, as we've been talking about. So thank you, Michelle, for telling us about the There's More to the Story Club. Best of luck with the rest of your discussions here this year. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll catch you at the next Kernels. Bye-bye.